All right, welcome back to Beneath the Helmet. Another great episode for you today. This is a podcast all about how you can learn to master yourself through mind, body, and spirit of being an elite firefighter. So, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please do so. And we're going to dive into this great episode today with Lynda Monk. So, Lynda Monk is a good friend of mine, as well as a fellow coach, social worker, author, keynote speaker, and just an amazing person. Also, the director of the International Association for Journal Writing, and an author of several books about journaling. She has extensive background around burnout, and that's where we're going to start our conversation today is around burnout, and then how to use journaling as a tool for your own self-care and your wellness through burnout. There'll probably be a part two because there's so much wealth here of how we can use journaling on a day-to-day basis for our own wellness. Today, we just got a snapshot, kind of introductory kind of level of how writing our thoughts and our feelings can change how we show up in the world. So, Lynda Monk, some of you may know the story around this, but she was the one who was coaching me through my burnout struggles as well. She was the one who, if you've read my book, you know that she was the coach who challenged me that one day back in June, a couple of years ago, and suggested why I hadn't written a book yet about my experience and what was stopping me. And that day, thanks to her encouragement, her words, and just being there for me, started the whole journey of writing my book, Burnt Around the Edges. So I owe a lot to her. I owe a lot to her just being a good friend, a mentor, somebody in the space of wellness, especially around burnout, but also for the fact of helping me and supporting me through my own burnout recovery and encouraging me to write the book, Burnt Around the Edges. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Until next time, stay well. All right, welcome back to the show, everyone. Another great episode, Beneath the Helmet, season 2. I get a very dear friend on the air today, someone who's helped me through a lot of my own challenges going through burnout. Somebody who was with me right in the very beginning, the early stages, who kind of kicked me in the butt to get my book going, which I owe a lot to her. So welcome to the show, Lynda. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, AJ. And I'm really excited to be here with you. And I'm excited for this evolution in your career.
Yes,
Very
well,
exciting.
like I said, you're a big part of it, so I really appreciate that. So tell our listener today a little bit about who Lynda Monk is and kind of what brought you to where you are today.
Wow. Well, I am a registered social worker, and I spent the first over a decade of my career as a social worker working in fairly high stress, high trauma work. I worked in child welfare in Ontario, and then I moved to the metropolis of Prince George, BC, where I worked in children's mental health. I did a lot of work for a number of years in the area of suicide intervention. I worked as a medical social worker in the ICU and emergency departments. And through this work, I really loved my frontline work as a social worker. I, really felt like it was a good fit for who I am. But I was really seeing early in my career that a number of colleagues would go off on stress leave. And it wasn't always announced that way. And of course, there's privacy around HR, as there should be, but it was really standing out to me because I was early in the career and I thought, what have I got myself into? And is this inevitable? Is this the type of career where things like vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, moral distress, burnout, are these? I was hearing all of these things. I was learning a bit about them at different conferences I would go to. I was certainly feeling the impact of the work on myself, how challenging it was to be in the face of high emotion and high distress on a regular basis, which was just a normal day of the work. And when I went to do my master's of social work degrees many years ago now, back in 95 to 98, I devoted that period of time, those studies, I was working alongside of it, to wanting to answer the question, how do you do this type of work frontline, high care, high service, trauma exposed work and not burn out? It was my guiding question. Every course I took, I ran that question through it, whether it was a research course or a, clinical practice course, whatever it was, I wanted to explore the answer to that question. And upon doing that, once I got through that, I realized that I actually wanted to leave my frontline work and start a training and coaching business where I could share what I learned. I really wanted to go out into the field and go into organizations and work with teams and staff and share what I had learned to the answer to that question, because I did learn there are many things that we can do to prevent burnout and to recognize it, not just individually for ourselves, but how do we as teams, as workplaces, from an employee health point of view, an organizational health point of view, what are things we can do to create resilient environments that can actually protect people from burnout? And so one thing led to another. So that's a bit about my professional work. And I am blessed to live on Salt Spring Island, where we both share the south end of Salt Spring as the place we call home. I'm a just celebrated 20-year anniversary with my husband Peter, and we have two teen sons, and our lives and our work, they're full. Family life and professional lives, and trying to care for ourselves while we care for others, both personally and professionally. It's a full life, and it's something that I think is really important for us to give time to, is our own well-being, and to do that in ways that really can help us to stay resilient and also stay enjoying what we're doing, because we want to do more than just survive. And when you're exposed to a lot of difficult things in the type of work that we might do, sometimes it can just feel like you're just kind of hanging on, trying to do it, and it really can impact our quality of life and our relationships and our health. And so I'm a really big believer in striving to thrive in our lives, and that takes effort, it takes tools, it takes resources, it takes knowledge. And yeah, that's a bit about me, AJ.
Wonderful. Well, you're a gem of knowledge, so welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
So, after all this, I'm sure you've seen your fair share of trauma and hardship and challenges. Did you ever come up with an answer to your question that you kind of proposed to every single research case study that you looked at? Was there a definitive answer to that question?
Well, there were lots of answers, and I think that's really important, that it's a complex issue. Something like professional burnout, PTSD, these are complex psychological phenomenon that we can face, and it's very natural to want the one thing. What is the magic thing? If we do this, we do this just one thing, we'll either heal from it or prevent it. And the good news is that there isn't just one thing, and the bad news is there isn't just one thing. So there's many opportunities, there's many things that we can do individually and also collectively and in workplaces that can help build that resilience. And to me, that provides as an opportunity when we actually can make a plan, say, like, these are some key things, if we put attention to them and resources to them, and energy, that they can yield some positive results for us. And I really think when we look at things like burnout prevention, it's important to never just look at it at the individual level, because what happens is it can really leave people isolated. Like, if I'm experiencing burnout, what's wrong with me? Or maybe that feeling of shame or embarrassment, or am I not cut out for this work? And all of that can really spiral someone into quite a place of distress and isolation. And the reality is, something like burnout happens because of many factors, individual factors, but also the nature of the work. That's why, first responders and social workers and healthcare professionals, frontline people who are in high care roles, were more vulnerable to things like burnout, not because of individual weaknesses or individual deficits, but because the nature of the work exposes us to so much that makes us vulnerable for those occupational hazards. So because of that, because it is the nature of the work, I think it's really important that burnout be looked at from a systemic level. What needs to happen in the organization, leadership, team building, uh, good, clear professional training, good supports, responsiveness that allows for a healthy environment to do the difficult work. So if we just leave it at the individual level, there's a lot more room for blame and shame, as if that person was just stronger or they were more stress resilient, they wouldn't be burning out. And that's just simply not true, because you can take individuals who maybe aren't doing a lot for their own self-care or stress management or burnout prevention and put them in a very robust organization where there's strong peer support, good leadership, clear roles, professional development, good conflict resolution in the workplace, like good organizational health and strong organizational practices. And you could take that person who maybe isn't doing much at all for their own well-being, and they can actually still hold their own because they're held by the context of the workplace, the strengths there. And likewise, you can take someone who's doing all kinds of self-care, proactive, living a healthy lifestyle, getting good rest, exercising, eating well, being proactive with stress management, and put them in a toxic work environment where there's not enough support, there's a lot of conflict, there isn't clear roles, there's just a lot of not recognition of employee wellness needs and so forth, and that person can burn out. So there's evidence of this that lets us know that ideally we want to take care at the individual level and help people know, what is burnout? How do you prevent it? What are some good practices that can be supportive? And what can happen at the workplace level so that there's the best chances that people can, one, do okay, and two, if they're not doing okay, they're in a supportive, responsive environment that will help them get through some of those difficult situations. So there's a lot to be done, and it takes a lot of intention. It takes education so that organizations and leaders and uh, employee wellness initiatives and so forth are actually informed. They're informed by what the research says, they're informed by best practices, and that individuals have a chance through their workplaces to be educated about these things as well. So the net effect of all of that intention and education and effort can really be extremely helpful.
You notice any improvements in organizations sharing their knowledge about burnout and burnout prevention, and increasing that awareness and that support for their staff and employees? Have you noticed a change and improvement, or has it stayed kind of plateau?
I think that organizations that are proactive and really put the effort into organizational health initiatives can really do see a lot of good results. And they're also generally places that people like to work because they feel cared for, they feel respected, they feel like their well-being matters, and that when they maybe do run into challenges, that they're in a safe environment to speak up, where they won't be judged, there won't be shame, there will be supportive resources forthcoming, and that really helps people access the help they need, when and if they need it. So it's in organizations that put effort into these things, I think they do see results. And the research shows that they tend to have higher rates of retention. They have less turnover. They have less absenteeism, less injuries on the workplace. Like there's metrics that suggest that creating these resilient, healthy work environments. Of course, nothing's perfect, but if it's responsive, it goes a long way.
I agree 100%. Yeah, I would say I've seen a little bit of increase, but still people are that I've seen in a lot of organizations, burnout still kind of lower down. A
Mhm.
lot of first responder agencies, PTSD and trauma are come to the top more than anything. But what I'm seeing from the people that I interview and my coaching clients is that they're struggling with the interpersonal dramas, the things that are causing their distrust and dislike of their organization,
Mhm.
um, versus the trauma they're getting exposed to.
Yeah. So often I've heard people say that it's not the work itself,
Mm,
that causes the burnout, even though you would think it might be.
mhm.
It's the dynamics in the workplace, the relationships with colleagues, maybe a poor relationship with the direct report, a manager, some of the toxic, gossip in the workplace. In other words, environments that have low trust behaviors create a very vulnerable environment, because when people are dealing with high stress, and those things themselves are stressors, they're the things that keep people up at night. They're the things that really can cause a lot of extra stress for people. That's before you've even done any part of your job. That's the personal dynamics, and it's why it's so important to actually address some of those things in the workplace. Work on good communication skills, work on conflict resolution, work, if there's difficult situations there, to be proactive about them, and to do the work to create an environment where people feel safe, they feel emotionally safe, they feel respected, and that's real work to do in a group of people.
The hardest work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
How would Lynda define burnout? Like, what do you have a go-to thing that you say when you're talking about burnout so people understand it a little clearer? Because, like you said, a lot of people think burnout is too much work. I'm working overtime, working 24/7. But what we're finding is it's not just about work. So, how would you define burnout?
Yeah. Well, I really think of it as something that accumulates over time. So we don't just burn out after, a bad day or a difficult shift, or, a series of difficult calls or interactions, but it's that high stress without much ebb and flow, without much reprieve, kind of just sitting in that high accumulative stress over time, that can start to create that burnout experience. And burnout is something that happens in stages. So the more we can know about what it looks like, hopefully the more responsive we can be to seeing it along the way, and be able to intervene before someone's, fully experiencing a full burnout. And because the symptoms of burnout happen on all dimensions of our well-being, they happen at the emotional level, physical, spiritual, our mental health. There's many symptoms that we can start being aware of as, kind of warning signs that maybe there's something here that needs to be responded to. And so years ago, when I learned about the stages of burnout, I found that very helpful, because it if we know that burnout is the accumulation of occupational stress over time, and work volume is just one of those stressors, but it's all those other things, the interpersonal dynamics. Is there enough resources to do the job? Is there enough financial resources, human resources? What's the tone and culture of the workplace? So many ingredients. But these stages of burnout, the first stage of it is actually that we want to do something that makes a difference. We're driven by an ideal. And I think that's really important when understanding burnout, because burnout happens to good people. Burnout happens to people who care about what they're doing, who devote so much of their life, their resources, their own well-being, even, to doing the job at hand, because it matters. They're purpose driven. And it that's something that I think is even more reason for us to take care, because we're trying to actually help people who really are in our midst, in our workplaces, and in our society and our communities, who are caring to do something that matters and is important. And that desire to help and care in systems that are quite often under-resourced. Maybe they don't have enough staff, or enough professional development, or enough, employee assistance resources, or support after difficult calls, or whatever it might be. This second stage of burnout happens when we're working towards all of that ideal. We're working hard in careers that matter to us, doing work that matters to us, and work that often matters, in our communities as well. First responders, firefighters, communities, we count on, people in these fields for the work that they do. And so there could be a lot of pressure around the responsibility of the role and the work. And the second stage of burnout is when a neglect of the self sets in. So we're serving this ideal, we're working hard, and it can be very subtle. Maybe a person used to take a lunch break and now they don't, they work through lunch. Maybe they used to go out with their friends, on a Friday at the end of a shift, just to relax and connect and have that social support. But the end of the week hits and people are just too tired and they just, they're not doing that. Maybe they used to be part of a sports club or something that they liked that was fun and healthy for them, and they've stopped doing that. These things that would be helpful, part of stress management, part of overall health and self-care, can really start to shrink because these subtle deprivations of what one needs themselves starts to happen because someone's working in service to this very demanding work. And the third stage of burnout is when there is this sense that our own needs are no longer valuable. Because if we ignore them long enough, we start to see them as something that doesn't matter. And when we see something doesn't matter, we're much less likely to do anything about it. We're much less likely to tend to it. So one's own need for rest might be seen as secondary to, working that overtime and doing whatever it is. Um, and when we avoid our own needs long enough, the fourth stage of burnout is when a person can really start to feel quite empty. They may feel depression. They may feel just complete exhaustion. Maybe hard to have a sense of meaning and purpose. They have like less patience. They're more frustrated. There's just that it's harder to feel things like joy. There can be a real sort of just numbing out and just kind of going through the motions. And what happens is people haven't often connected that, oh, I'm feeling this way because, 5 years ago I stopped doing things that are good for me because I'm just doing, all of this work and so forth. And the fifth stage of burnout is that hitting that complete wall, that just emotional, physical, mental collapse, where in that state, it almost becomes not optional to have to do something because it's very difficult. We may not be functioning very well. We may not even be able to do our jobs. We can be dealing with a lot of anxiety, interruption to sleep, like just really unwell at that stage. So if we know that burnout happens in stages and we can be responsive, it's much easier to bounce back from the early signs of burnout than it is to try to recover when we've already hit that full sort of collapse place with burnout. And that's where things like training and professional development can be so valuable when people can learn what burnout looks like, learn the stages of it, learn the symptoms of it, not just for themselves, but with each other. There can be a more proactive response, a preventative response to it.
I couldn't agree more. It's like I got goosebumps with your talking there because essentially all five steps I felt to the core, and just kind of reliving what you were saying there is like, wow, that really resonates with me. And also on the fact of I didn't know any of this prior to burnout. I didn't know a single thing about burnout. Didn't know any of these things that you should be watching out for, the five steps. So yeah, appreciate you sharing that. And it just kind of resonated for me, and I'm sure for the listener right now as well. So
Yeah. It's important as well for us to understand that this happens in the context of our careers, of the demands of our careers, of our lives. And it is something that can, we're not always in environments that are encouraging healthy balance. We might be in environments that are quite the opposite, that are rewarding overworking, that are rewarding, like there's this almost this martyrdom that can happen of working extra shifts. And I'm not saying that in any sort of blame way, but the culture of the work environments can really reward behaviors and choices that actually can fuel burnout. Lots of overtime, just sort of go, 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 and all of these things that can actually make it very difficult for people to pace themselves, to care for themselves. Most of us haven't necessarily had, let's say, a manager who might come along and say, I really appreciate how you're taking your lunch break. It's really great that you're taking care of yourself, or it's great that you go home at the end of your shift so that you can also, enjoy your family life. And we're often not, we're more what gets reflected is this over functioning. It gets fed, it gets rewards like, wow, you're so devoted, you're here all the time, you work so hard, and it feeds this over functioning versus validating and supporting the behaviors that are a more balanced, the things that we need to have in place to help prevent burnout. So cultures of work can really contribute to and feed into this. The other is leadership. People will follow the leader. If a leader's there after hours, other people kind of will do that because they think, oh, maybe that's what they're supposed to do to, do a good job. And I know it's difficult in frontline responding because it's shift work, it's crisis calls, it's not a 9 to 5, but the same principles can apply. It's what's the tone that's set by the leadership, what's being role modeled about work-life balance, what is the discourse on stress management in the workplace, is it seen as something that is a collective responsibility. um all of these things all play together, and it can be quite shocking to be I remember years ago being in a training on vicarious trauma, and it was in the first 10 years of my career, and I was at this workshop, and the facilitator was talking about the different signs of vicarious trauma, and one of them was having a heightened startle reflex. And I was thinking about how every time I would hear a microwave go off or a truck back up, a beeping sound, I would like feel it in my physical body. I'd kind of feel like my chest tighten, and just like on alert. And she's describing this, and I'm thinking, that's what's happening. I have this like not good startle reflex. And I ended up after this workshop deciding I wanted to go and just learn a little bit more and get a little bit of help with this, because I thought this is kind of hard wiring in me. And it had come from when I worked in child welfare. I did a lot of after hours work, and I had a pager, and the pager would beep, 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 in the night, wake you out of a dead sleep. And, you had to get up, go make the call, find out what it was, often get in the car, have to go do a child abuse investigation. Sometimes that involved having to take children into your car, take them to a foster home. This is the middle of the night. And but this beeping was associated with getting into action, having to be responsive. And it also was associated with difficult situations, like highly emotionally charged situations, often exposed to different traumatic situations. And it was just normal. It's just part of the job. No one ever talked about it, or it was just what it was. And then when I worked in the hospital, we also had pagers. And so the pager would go off when you had to go to emergency and deal with something, or go to ICU, or um, whatever it was. And sometimes it was nothing. Sometimes it was someone needed money, for a taxi. But sometimes it was a child that died. And sometimes it was a morgue viewing. And sometimes it was, really difficult things. And so my system had associated, as it will, our senses, what we see, hear, touch, smell, all of these things are part of what can be part of a trauma response. And So I had, a microwave would go off. There is no need to be on alert. There is nothing to respond to other than to get my coffee. I've heated up for the fifth time. And, but my body would be responding
Mhm.
as if there was, a need for that. And, I didn't want to spend my life being nervous when the microwave went off or when I was but if I hadn't have learned that, I would never have made the connection. I would have just, "Oh, that's weird," or, like, you think you're kinda like, "What's going on here?" And you just normalize it because happening, and you don't really know why it's happening or what it is, and no one's ever, like, talked about it. So it's why the education part is so important, because again, that awareness is prevention, and even though it might not prevent everything, it helps us be aware to be responsive. It's like, oh, that's something that needs attention, that's something that could use some help, I need to talk to somebody about this. And it normalizes that certain things happen, and there's things we can do about them. We're not helpless, it's not hopeless, but it does take effort, and it takes knowledge, and it takes support.
Well, thanks for sharing that. What tools did you use, or what process did you go through to kind of process through that? And it sounded like it was past tense. So I'm
Mhm.
assuming you don't have that reaction today, or very little, maybe. I could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you come through to that? What was your strategy there?
Yeah. Well, I accessed our EAP program, and did some counseling work with someone who is very knowledgeable about vicarious trauma symptoms. So I was able to explain what was happening. They totally understood. It was normalized, and then it was about doing some things to kind of recalibrate this, my central nervous system, really, which was what was happening. So different, like, mindfulness practices, and so lots of breath work, lots of grounding, centering. As you know, I'm a big believer in the healing power of journaling. I did a lot of journaling to just process my emotions around it and kind of unhook. There was also some exposure type of therapy. So just being around those sounds and putting my attention that there was no danger. So I'm perfectly safe in my own home when the microwave goes off. So, but those sorts of things, kind of um, recalibrating my nervous system with it, recognizing and understanding it goes a long ways, just normalizing it. And over time, it can begin to, you know, settle down. And I still have I think probably all my life I'll have a heightened, like, startle response. I even had that as a child. Um, but like, for example, my boys noted, like, not when they were little even, like, it wasn't good to, like, just, like, hide in the bathroom and jump out when I walked by, or these sorts of things, because it would I found it very, like, startling. I mean, most people don't like people jumping out on them, but it would be, like, more upsetting. Yeah. So just creating safe environment to create the conditions that help minimize, activating it, if you wish. Um, and it really didn't take that long. Once I realized the connection, and I did a little bit of work around it, and I felt in control of it. It didn't feel so, like, alarming. It was like, oh, okay, that's that. And so I could just kind of put it in its place. Yeah, but it doesn't happen now. I can be around a microwave and beeping. I still don't like startling sounds. Um, but it doesn't create that sense of, like, my heart won't start to pound and that sort of thing, but it'll still I still don't like it, basically.
Like you say, who likes getting scared from somebody hiding behind the
Yeah.
shower?
I blame my brother. When we were kids, our bathroom was at the top of the stairs, where the first door on the left before we got to our bedrooms. And he used to always, like, hide there, and I'd come running up the stairs and he'd come jumping out. And so it's It's all his fault.
If you're listening now, yes. So, yes, you mentioned the journaling, and I know that's a huge part of your life, a huge part of your healing that you've done for your own wellness. You share it with the world now, and you're now the director of International Association for Journal Writing, and wrote books about this and done workshops on this. You're definitely an expert in this field. So for myself, I write a lot. I'm always writing, but I wouldn't say I journal per se. So how would you take writing and journaling, and what's the maybe the difference there, or the similarities?
Sure. Um, First, I'll just like to say how that kind of came about because it links back to something I shared earlier when I was doing my Master's of Social Work degree, trying to answer that question, how do you prevent burnout? As I was doing that research, I would come across mention in articles and other research I was reviewing that talked about the importance of having a reflective practice. And journaling was often mentioned as one of the ways we can prevent burnout. And I was so surprised by this because surprised and not surprised. I'd been a journal writer since I was a young girl and sort of on and off in my teens. And in my 20s, during that first decade of my social work career, I kind of was with it and away from it. I was working full time and doing different degrees, and I was in my first marriage, and it was busy. But what I did notice is that on difficult days in the work, if there had been like a client death, for example, or like just difficult things, my instinct was to journal, to just take that time to process my own emotions, to get it out. And I noticed that I felt better. The circumstance didn't change, obviously, but how I felt in the circumstance did change. I felt like I was kind of able to process it, kind of clear it, be ready for the next thing, that was going to happen, because there's always the next thing that's going to happen in, high response work. And so when I was reading this in the research about how having a journaling or some sort of reflective practice can be so helpful, I was like, I had this sort of light bulb moment. It's like, that's it. This is my secret sauce. This is why I haven't burnt out so far. And if I just keep writing, maybe I never will. And but I got very curious. And so I started to look for research on the healing power of writing. And so this parallel process was happening. I'm kind of looking at all this different burnout prevention strategies for individuals, teams, organizations. Parallel process, I'm reading about writing to heal, how writing can help heal trauma, how writing can reduce stress, all of these things. And so, my thinking was sort of running these um, curiosities about how that fit together. And when I started my own training business and was doing burnout prevention workshops and care for caregiver sessions and all of these sorts of topics, I would often include a section on journaling. I would guide people through some guided journaling, and uh, in the evaluations that would come back from these workshops, people often, I'd say, what did you like best? What did you get, the most out of it? What are you taking away? These sorts of questions. And people often mentioned how much they loved the journaling. I was like, well, I really like the journaling too. So I started creating whole workshops just on that. So instead of it just being like, half an hour in a full day workshop, I thought, well, what if I made a 3 hour journaling for caregiver well-being, or journaling for to reduce stress for social workers? I kind of just, magnified the light on it. And that, became a thing. And so your question around writing and journaling, when it comes to using journaling to heal, to help prevent burnout, to recover, there's some studies happening right now around the power of journaling to help recover symptoms of PTSD in veterans, for example. Some of these projects are going on in the US. The key thing is writing about our thoughts and feelings. So we might keep a journal and say, today I went and got my groceries and I did this and I went for a walk at Burgoyne Bay or whatever the thing we're doing is. And of course, a journal is a place to capture our lives. Journaling is a storytelling practice, it's a self care practice, it's a way we make meaning of our lives through our stories, we live our stories. So it is a place where we can capture our lives. And if we're using it to write about our thoughts and feelings, it's known as expressive writing. There is a cathartic healing value in that. It's getting the inside out. It gives us a chance. It's like digesting. We are processing our experiences. And by doing that on a regular basis, it helps things to not get locked in. It also helps us be very self-aware. It helps us grow in our self-awareness. There's a lot of self-discovery that can happen through a practice like journaling. We're bringing our curiosity, our questions. We're giving ourselves a chance to pause. Remember that trajectory or those stages of burnout where that self-neglect sits in. By taking time to journal, we actually are interrupting that. We are pausing, we're taking time to think, we're taking time to be intentional, we're taking time to notice patterns. It's a place to be honest with ourselves. It's a place where we can see what's going on. So we're not just on autopilot, but we're actually taking that time to, get our thoughts and feelings down on paper. And there's research that shows, for example, some great work by Dr. James Pennebaker. He wrote a book called Writing to Heal. And his research has people write about the most stressful, traumatic thing they've been through. And they write for 20 minutes a day, 4 days in a row. And he did some research in it around all of this, and it showed that people had less visits to doctor appointments. He did blood work in his studies. There was better immune function, uh, and so forth. So people get better rest. There's all kinds of health benefits, more clarity, better able to make decisions, being able to be more responsive versus reactive. So that benefit of that mindfulness that gets engaged. People are have less tension. The physical body will hold so much tension, sore backs, neck, digestion issues, and again, this getting it out versus holding it in. It also helps interrupt shame responses, and so forth. There's a whole world of benefits that come from doing something like journaling. And it's not a one size fits all, just like meditation isn't for everyone and yoga isn't for everyone and deep breathing, but these are all good things to have in our self-care toolboxes that support our central nervous systems, that support our bodies to be able to relax. And that's so important to keep engaging that healing response in our own nervous systems to be able to cope with the stressors that are in our midst in a way that is less damaging to us.
Kind of going back to my original question, I write a lot, but during my writing of my book, I think listening to you, I would consider that journaling because I
Mhm.
kind of wrote my feelings and my what I was going through versus just maybe not third person, but just a little bit more extended and not so deep into what I was feeling. So, yeah, now you say that, I think I have done journaling. I don't do it on a regular basis, but I write a lot, and maybe there's a fine line between both of those that works for me, anyways, right? So,
Yeah. And, I've read your book, and because your book is you sharing your story, it's not just an academic look at how to manage stress as a firefighter or first responder. You share a lot of tools that can be helpful, but you share your story of why it even matters. And you share what you went through and some of your own recovery and what helped you. And that writing about all of that is Is that healing narrative. The other is that you're making sense of your experience through writing something like that. And when someone else reads it, it can help them make sense of their experience. And that really is a writing to heal, gift that was you gave yourself and that you've given other people in the book. There's a process called narrative therapy, and you may be familiar with it, but it's really about restoring. So, for example, with trauma recovery, we can't change what's happened, but we can try to restory our experiences so that the narrative we have for ourselves is one that pulls on the resilience story. So there's something called, and I'm sure you've heard of it, post-traumatic growth. It doesn't mean that every traumatic experience we've been through or the accumulation of trauma in a field like firefighting that can be completely mitigated necessarily, but if we can stay focused on, what strengths are we gaining from this? What are we learning from these experiences? How do we generate things like optimism and hope in the face of seeing difficult things? These are all sorts of things we can cultivate through journaling. So, for example, we can have a gratitude journaling practice. We can write about at the end of the day before we go to sleep, write 3 or 4 things you're grateful for. Gratitude strengthens our resilience. So all of these types of things we can do in a journal, um, what we're feeling proud of, what went well. Also just getting the not good stuff out, just being able to vent without judgment and with self-compassion present. It's like a self-coaching tool that we can turn to through journaling. Uh, there's that sense of companionship. A lot of times people are isolated when they're dealing with things like PTSD or burnout. There could be a lot of just withdrawing and isolation and overwhelm. And one of my colleagues, Kathleen Adams, Kay Adams, she has a book called The Friend. She'll talk about journaling as a friend at the end of the pen. And this idea that with a journaling practice, we're actually companioning ourselves. We're accepting ourselves, we're meeting ourselves, we're writing about our experiences. And there's a lot of value that comes from being able to have a companioning practice. And journaling is something that fits in that category.
Yeah, as you keep speaking, I'm thinking I journal more than I thought I did.
Yeah, that's often true.
Yep,
We
yep.
yeah, yeah.
And especially, I'm glad you brought up the gratitude, because I think gratitude and journaling and writing down, things that you're grateful for is super powerful for your mental health, your well-being, and it's just a way to process that. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
It's also a place we can really cultivate our worldview. And when we do work that can be scary and overwhelming and exhausting and also meaningful and rewarding and purposeful, it's all of those things all at once. It's a place we can keep reflecting on some of the good things we see in ourselves, in the world, and being able to stay oriented to a positive worldview and not get discouraged or get, um, so mired down in a sense of hopelessness is really important for our mental health. And it's really important for our resilience, being able to see ourselves in positive regard, being able to see the world in positive regard, being able to have a sense of optimism. And I don't mean that as a rose-colored glasses or toxic positivity, but are we able to glean a sense of hopefulness, a sense of optimism about our lives, about other people? And these things are particularly important in our world today because there are a lot of things challenging our faith in our systems, in our politics, our economics, our organizations, and it can undermine our sense of feeling good about fellow humans, about the world at large. And so, and it's why we're seeing a lot of mental health challenges. We're seeing higher rates of anxiety, depression, and so forth in the general population. uh, because some of this sense of just uneasiness and what feels real, what feels true, so all of these things, being able to stay connected to your own inner truth is very grounding and very centering. And journaling helps you keep coming home to yourself, to keep, thinking these things through, processing them, writing about the good things, and problem solving. One of my favorite things to journal about is to make a list of questions I have in my life right now. It could be in my career, my business, my marriage, my parenting, my own health, anything at all. And what questions do I have? And write those questions down, and they become great journaling prompts. And they also are a way into accessing your own needs. Again, burnout prevention is that subtle deprivation of your own needs. When you orient your writing, towards what do you need, what do you want, what questions do you have, you really engage. You're not ignoring yourself. You are tuning in, you're listening, you're writing, and it counteracts that, self neglect, if you wish.
Love that. That's a great tip. So for the listener who's listening on this right now and like journaling, yeah, I think I could try that. And I think that might be something that's good for me. What would you say some of the first kind of steps to start a journaling practice?
Yeah. Get a journal.
Step
Get a
one.
journal. Get a pen you like, fast moving pen or a slow moving
So
pen.
pen and paper, is that a must, or could you do it on computer, or could you do voice notes, or
You
is a
can.
pen and paper the best?
Well, I do advocate for pen and paper journaling because there's the research done around in sort of the neuro psychology space that just language centers and emotional centers in the brain can be more activated through a hand to paper. And in fact, there's some studies done on that. There's acupressure points in our dominant hands that, when making contact with the page, actually have some impact on us. So that could be a whole conversation, but there is value in the pen to paper. However, what's most important is taking that time for oneself, for processing thoughts and feelings. And if someone can do that easier, there's journaling apps. We often have our phones, we can dictate a note. You can do password protected journals online. So I always say, whatever it is that gets people to doing it is the most important thing. And to, yeah, experiment a little bit and see what works for you, but have the tools, whatever they might be for you. And set a time. Things that are in our schedule are things we tend to get to, things that are just, oh, I'll do that if I have time. Most of us don't necessarily get to those things. We're more likely to get to things that are scheduled and in real time. And so, picking a time of day that you'd like to journal. Maybe it's over your morning coffee. I get up, I set my coffee up the night before, and I get up early. And the first thing I do is a little bit of meditation, and then I go to the page and journal. And I'm often writing with my right hand and rubbing my dog's belly with my left hand because she sits beside me on the couch. But I share that because I don't have to think about, as my day picks up pace and it's full day. I don't think, oh, when am I going to journal? When am I going to journal? It's just built in as a habit, just like brushing my teeth. So pick a time that you'd like to fit it in, and know that you don't have to journal for hours to get benefit. Even 5 minutes of journaling can have great benefit. In many of my workshops, we'll do timed writings, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And people are amazed at how much can come out in a short time and how good they feel after just taking that short time. So you can set a timer and do a 5 minute timed writing, a 10-minute timed writing. And it can be helpful to have prompts. Sometimes the blank page can feel a little daunting. Well, what do I write about? Where do I start? Am I doing this right? And with journaling, whatever you write is right. It's a very empowering practice. There's no way to get it wrong. And, there's some things that can help make it easier and so forth. But it really is an act of trusting ourselves. And simple prompts can be things like, right now I feel, right now I'm thinking, right now I notice. Just kind of coming into the present moment, paying attention can be helpful to take a couple breaths just to center yourself, ground yourself, and arrive to what you're doing with that intent, mindful presence, and see where the writing takes you. Yeah. There's practices like the morning pages by Julia Cameron, artist of or the author of The Artist's Way. Many people do the morning pages,
Mhm.
so that's filling 3 pages, 8.5 by 11 pages, stream of consciousness writing. Just write about anything. You can even say, I don't have anything to say. I don't even know what to write about, or I need to turn up the heat, or I have to go get some socks, or whatever. You could just write. And once you're done 3 pages, you stop. And you do it before you've done anything else. And over time, you build your own relationship with your own voice writing, and lots of great stuff can come.
Very cool. I think I figured out why your coffee needs to get in the microwave 15 times
Yeah,
because
exactly.
so
Exactly.
as we come to a close, what is one thing you want to make sure our listener hears today about burnout, about journaling for wellness? Anything that you want to make sure that's shared with our listener?
I think it's the reminder that you really matter. Yeah. Your health and your well-being, they really matter. They impact everything. Our quality of life, our quality of work, our relationships. And it's really easy for them to get down on the priority list because our lives are full, and our being able to prioritize yourself and your own well-being is an act of will. It does take effort, and it does take support. Communicating with the people around you, your partner if you have one, your family members, your colleagues, not trying to do it all alone, being able to have a supportive, um, even just a couple of supportive people who care about you, who you trust, who you can, have some accountability with, doing good things for ourselves. And um, to also know that there is no shame in getting help. Sometimes we know we need help, but we might not know where to get it, or might be afraid to ask for it, or worry how we might be looked at if we get help. But this is complex work that people are doing, and it has real impact. And we need to give ourselves permission to make our own health and well-being a top priority, and then be around people who make it a priority alongside of us, including colleagues and people we love. So, and it's never a bad time to just hit pause and evaluate, what do I need right now, and how can I meet that need? And it might be a glass of water. It might be getting outside for some fresh air. It might be talking to somebody. But there's somewhere along the way we make the decision, or it gets made for us. Sometimes we might hit a crisis, and uh, even with our best intentions, and we might get really sick, or we might hit that burnout wall. And Gaber Mate has a wonderful book, When the Body Says No. There may be times where it can get the better of us, and to just try our best to be very kind to ourselves. And it's like, okay, what do I need now? And to really um, take seriously your own well-being, because it's the heart of our whole life, including how long we get to be here. So
All right.
take good care. And
Mhm.
whether, journaling's part of your self-care or other things, have a self-care plan, write it down. Like, what is your resilience plan? What is your self-care plan as a first responder, as a human being? And let that plan matter. Let yourself really matter in the midst of it all.
Love it. What does Lynda Monk need a little bit more of in her life to thrive even greater?
Mm. Well, one of the things is getting to a project I've been procrastinating on. I've been working on my adoptee memoir on and off and off and off and off for like 25 years. And I just turned 55 recently, and um, I need to not ignore that anymore. Yeah, because it's important to me, and um, completing it's important to me. So giving myself permission to let some other things be a lower priority, so I can make um, my writing project a bigger priority. Yeah,
It
yeah,
rings a
that's one
bell.
of the things.
Kind of rings a bell. About 2.5 years ago, sitting on my decks, you said to me, "What's holding you back? Why? What's holding you back?" Right. So,
Yeah,
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 beautiful,
yeah.
beautiful.
Well, I worked on it for 2 hours this morning, AJ.
Oh,
So
good job.
it's getting me now.
Love it. Can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
So, how can people learn more about Lynda Monk and some of your workshops and your offerings that you have and your books?
Yeah.
Share with the listener right now of how they can connect with you.
Yeah, I have two websites. One I'm about to have a meeting on in like 50 minutes for a website redo on lyndamonk.com, and it's LYNDAMONK.com. There's some of my training workshops and so forth there. And my other website for the International Association for Journal Writing and our membership community and courses and so forth is iajw.org.
Well, Lynn, it's been a total honor. We see each other in passing sometimes in town or on the trails with our dogs, and it's just always a pleasure chatting with you. And you're a wealth of knowledge and compassion, and just a good, solid human. So thanks for sharing with us today.
Thanks, AJ, and thank you for all the meaningful work you do. And I too love seeing you and Kathy and Murphy when we cross paths out in the forest by the ocean. And um, it's always good to connect with you. And thanks for having me here. And take care,
Likewise.
everybody.
Yes, likewise. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this great episode with Lynda Monk. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.